Hey friends, I'm going to start with this question purposely because it's a question that applies to tonight and tomorrow. This is the first question right here. Dear Rabbi, your Q&A falls on the first month of Elul, the month before the high holidays. Can you please share with us what the significance of this month is all about? So a very apropos question indeed. Tonight and tomorrow is Rosh Chodesh Elul. It's the first of the month of Elul. It opens up what is called, in the words of our sages, Chodesh HaRachamim VaSelichot, the month of mercy and of forgiveness, in which we are asked to look inward. In fact, the month Elul itself, the word of the name of this month, Elul, is an Aramaic word. It means to search. And that is, again, because during this month we have to search inward, rectify that which needs to be rectified, and enhance that which needs to be enhanced. All the good deeds, all the kindness needs to be multiplied, and God forbid any bad habit or any negative aspect of our personality, of our deeds, should be eradicated completely. That's what we do. The Lubavitcher Rebbe would give a beautiful parable about this month, and that is that it's like a businessman. Every businessman that once in a while he has to shut his business almost. He doesn't maybe have to close the door, but he has to take out the books and really look at his business internally, see whether he's making a profit or not, whether the things that need to be changed or not, what the numbers are that are coming in and that are going out. You need to make an evaluation of the entire business. Chodesh Elul is the evaluation of our own personal business right here, of this business, of the business of us as human beings. We really have to ask ourselves, maybe the first question of God to human being, to Adam himself, Ayeka, where are you in this world? Where am I? Am I going in the right direction? Am I in the right spiritual mindset? Am I in the right deed mindset, or the right deed circle? Am I doing the right thing? That's the question of this month. But there's an additional layer to this month that I also want to mention. And the Kabbalists have taught us, it's brought in a book called Lekutei Torah by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the author of the Tanya that we study each and every Sunday during our soul class. And everyone is welcome at 7:15. But Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi will teach that this is a month in which the king is in the fields. I'm sure you've heard this expression, and we mentioned that, I think, during one of the services today or yesterday. The king is in the fields. What does this mean? That means that God is the king. God is the king of kings. Now, just like a human king, if I were to want to meet a human king, say the king of Poland or the king of Spain, it would be very hard. I would have to go through one secretary and another secretary, and would have to wait many months, and then maybe I could meet the king. But if the king is going out to the fields here, to the streets of Scottsdale, Arizona, if there's a parade here with the king on Shea Boulevard, then I could meet the king without any secretaries, without any of this headache. Same year, during the year, the king is in his palace. God is in his palace. He's sitting on his throne of glory, on what's called Kisei HaKavod. And we pray to him, and we want to meet with him each and every day, 3 times a day. But sometimes the angels who are his secretaries say to us, you know what, you'll have to wait a little more. This prayer is not going to go all the way to the king. But in the month of Elul, friends, this is an important point to make. In the month of Elul, God goes out to the field. God comes out to us. He wants to meet us. Not only that, but he wants to meet us with a smiling face and a shining countenance, as it says, panim meirot, and with a shining face. And all we have to do is, in a way, come out of our comfort zone, come out of our home, reach out to the king, prepare for that meeting, say to the king, you know what, I'm here for you also, not just in my speech, not just in my thoughts, but also in my actions. And then we'll find that the king is there in the fields for us too. And that reunification with the king will no doubt then enable us to start the year fresh and new, and with God's abundant blessings. That is really what this month is about. I'll conclude just this thought and then move on to the other questions, obviously. But this thought with a beautiful Hasidic story about the Baal Shem Tov. I may have shared this before, and if you've heard it from me, then I apologize. But the story is about the Baal Shem Tov being approached by his students who asked him, Rabbi, please tell us how best we should prepare for the high holidays during this month. And he said, I can't tell you, but if you go and see my student, it was some farmer or something like that in this village, and you just watch him prepare, then you'll know exactly what to do. They went to his house and they spied on him. And in the middle of the night, this farmer goes to his library and he pulls out 2 notes. And in one note, he had all of the wrongdoings of last year, and not major things, but he told God, look, here I didn't pray well enough. Here I was a little angry. Here I missed this good deed. I could have helped someone and I ignored him completely. Here, whatever it may be. And then he said to God, please, I'm asking really for forgiveness. Chodesh HaRachamim VaSlichot, it's the month of forgiveness. Forgive me for these things. And then he took a list. And on that second list, he had written down everything that God wronged him with that year. He said, God, here you were wrong. My wife was sick. Yeah, you were wrong. You didn't give me enough livelihood. I couldn't finish the month. Yeah, you were wrong. You did this and that. And at the end of this revisiting of the list, he turns to God and he says, God, you know what? I'll forgive you for your list. You forgive me for, and let's start this year anew. And in a way, that's what we have to do during this month of Elul. Have a list, visit it, try and rectify it. But at the end of the day, we can say to God, you know what? I'll forgive you for your list. You forgive us for our list. Let's start on Rosh Hashanah anew with a fresh and abundantly blessed year. That's to answer that first question. Second question, again, with no particular order. Is it wrong for a Jew to say, I'm keeping my fingers crossed for good luck? And how about the expression of knock wood? And if so, is there a Jewish equivalent to crossing fingers? I'm waiting back about a job interview and need all the luck I can get. All right, so good question. Is it wrong to say that I'm keeping my fingers crossed? Or the expression of knocking on wood, and people actually knock on wood when they say that expression. I'm sure we hear it quite often. I've heard it many, many times. You're right. It's rooted in a very Christian custom a long, long time ago, when people thought that the cross of Jesus would ward off any evil or any bad luck. And until today, therefore, people cross their fingers to try and create that same symbol of the cross, or knock on wood, which is, by the way, the same thing, where they knock on the wood of the cross to try and ward off that evil. So it's a very Christian symbol, and yes, Jews do not do that, because we don't believe in that worship. We even think that it might be borderline with idol worship, and therefore we stay away from it as much as we can, because we're as careful about idol worship as we are with everything else. It's one of the worst prohibitions in the Torah. Even what's called avak avodah zarah in the words of the sages, which means the dust of idol worship should be completely eradicated from our lives. So yes, it's a wrong one. Is there an equivalent to that expression of crossing your fingers or knocking on wood? I don't know. I don't know if there's an equivalent, but I will say this. I'm a big fan, as you all know, of mitzvahs. When you do a mitzvah, you create good. And in a way, that mitzvah is a vessel to God's blessings. I think when God says, oh, maybe he doesn't deserve kindness, but oh, 1 second, he just gave tzedakah. He was just kind with someone else. He's kind with someone else. I'll be kind with them. And by the way, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was big into this. And when people would ask blessings, he wouldn't just say, yes, I bless you. He would say, take upon yourself this mitzvah. How about you start lighting Shabbat candles? How about you do this? Once you've done that mitzvah, you've created a vessel for that blessing. So I would encourage you to think of a mitzvah that you don't do yet, and maybe then that mitzvah will create the perfect vessel for the blessing of a job to come. That is so much better and so much more effective, no doubt, than any other omen out there. Okay, that was that question. Next question is this. Dear Rabbi, sometimes I think of the oddest questions, but I have one that I just don't recall ever coming up before. This is the question. I was wondering, what did our ancestors coming out of Egypt actually know of their history prior to that time? I presume they must have been familiar with Jacob, as these bones were taken from Egypt to Hebron. That's right. When the Jews finally left Egypt, they took they took the bones of Joseph. So they were familiar with Joseph. But yeah, you're right. Joseph, and his family, of course, are the ones who took the bones of Jacob to Hebron. But they took the bones during the Grand Exodus. They took the bones of Joseph. So they must have been familiar with Joseph. But do we acknowledge that they were already aware of Abraham, the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, which means Laban's deception and other details that were revealed in the Torah at Har Sinai? Or was their first awareness of these chapters of our history? Might they have known of the flood through prior generations, repeating the history over time, before the history was revealed by Hashem to Moshe at Har Sinai? So were they aware of it or not? That's the question. When they came out of Egypt, were they aware of the ancestors of Abraham, of Isaac, of Sarah, of Rebecca, of Rachel? Were they aware of them? So there's two things that I can think of. Number one, the Talmud states very clearly that the Torah was given to our forefathers. And our forefathers passed down this Torah even before Mount Sinai to Moses. And then Moses, when he received the Torah Mount Sinai, he knew already a lot of it because much of the Torah was already given to our forefathers. And our forefathers, the Talmud goes as far as saying that our forefathers, in fact, fulfilled the mitzvahs. They knew about the mitzvahs. So the Torah wasn't something new when the Torah was eventually given on Mount Sinai. And therefore, just based on that, I would submit to you that the Jewish people knew. I mean, if the Torah was given and the Torah speaks of Abraham and of Sarah and Isaac and Rebecca, etc., then the Torah was already in existence. They probably knew from the Torah that already existed again, that these events happen. In addition to that, remember the Jewish family is a family that loves to speak about its ancestors. We all speak about our ancestors all the time. I think there's no, really, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's no people in the world that are so connected to the history as the Jewish people are, to their ancestors. I think we received that not just from our parents and from our grandparents, but all the way from Abraham. And I have no doubt, just based on that, that the Jewish people knew that they came from the congregation of Jacob. They were, by the way, called the Bnei Israel. They were called the Israelites. Who's Israel? Israel is Jacob. So they must have asked themselves, well, why are we called Israelites? Oh, yeah, that's right, because our ancestor was Jacob. So they surely knew of Jacob. And knowing them, they asked questions, and they surely knew of the ancestors also of Jacob and knew exactly the tree that they were coming from. So just based on these two ideas, I think they already knew those chapters of our history that came before them. Okay, next question. After the bedtime shema, there is, which we say every night, the shema before going to sleep, there is a phrase that is repeated 3 times. What is the meaning, and is it something one says every night? So you're right, actually there are multiple phrases. It depends on the nusach, on the version that you use, whether Sephardic, Ashkenazic, but all have multiple verses that are repeated 3 times. And those verses really speak of God's protection. That's what they all have in common. Now, what's interesting is that we repeat them 3 times, as we do with other prayers in other times of the year or other times of the day. And the reason we repeat them 3 times is because we believe that when something is repeated 3 times, or when it is done 3 times, it becomes an established fact. We learn this, by the way, interestingly enough, from a Mishnah that says that if an animal attacked 3 times, then it's considered a dangerous animal and cannot be domesticated. Why? Because if it attacked once, maybe it's not dangerous then. Twice, still maybe not. 3 times, it makes him dangerous. So when we repeat something 3 times, it becomes an established fact. Now, when we say a blessing 3 times, then that blessing becomes an established fact. And therefore, those verses are recited 3 times to ensure the blessing of protection becomes established, becomes a solid part of our lives. So that's the answer, that question. I hope I answered it. Next question. We heard so much about Rabbi Steinsaltz, and yes, I mean, you haven't heard anything yet. Much more is to come. If I've driven you crazy about Rabbi Steinsaltz and his legacy, just you wait, because we've only scratched the surface. But We want to know more about, and this is the question about Rebbetzin Steinsaltz. We have heard so much about the rabbi and seemingly so little about his wife. Are there some memories and thoughts you can share? So, yes, Rabbi. So first of all, I know her quite well. She's truly a wonderful woman. She comes from a very illustrious Chabad family, the Azimov family. Rabbi Steinsaltz, in fact, was very proud of the family that his wife came from. He even told me a story about his wife's grandfather. He was known to be a very pious Jew in Russia who fought against communism and was truly a saint. And he told me the story. Rabbi Steinsaltz actually told me the story here in Arizona as we were walking back from shul to his hotel on a Shabbat afternoon. He told me the story of his wife's grandfather, speaking of Rebbetzin Steinsaltz, Rabbi Chaim Hillel Azimov, I think that was his name. And he once needed bypass surgery of his heart. And unfortunately, back in the days, they didn't know exactly, they didn't have all the methods to put a person to sleep. Not only that, they only had, very few methods, but the methods that they did have at the position they couldn't use on this Hasidic Jew. Why? Because he was allergic to all sorts of things and they just couldn't perform that. So they told him, look, we're going to have to perform the surgery while you're awake. Now, just imagine that. And he said, no problem. Just do me a favor. Before the doctor comes into the room, he told his wife, let me know. I'll start saying a Hasidic discourse, which will distract me. And afterwards, then that's it. And then hopefully I won't feel anything. Fine. The day comes, his wife says, the doctor's coming in the room. Start saying the Hasidic discourse. They open him up without any anesthesia. And they do the bypass surgery for quite a few hours and then the Hasidic discourse. The doctor patches him back, finishes the job. The doctor finishes the job. He leaves the room, still saying a Hasidic discourse. Finally, he finished. He opened up his eyes after saying the Hasidic discourse. He turns to his wife and he says to her, no, when is the doctor coming? He hadn't felt anything. He was completely, that's the man he was. He was able to truly be so in tune with his soul that it elevated him to the upper worlds, disconnected him from this world altogether. So that's the type of family she comes from. That's one. Her herself as a person, she's a psychologist. She's an educated woman. She studied in France and became a psychologist. I think she studied at the Sorbonne, if I'm not mistaken. And she practiced psychology for many years. Now, what's interesting is this, that she was as devoted, no matter her profession, no matter her being a mother, no matter her being a rabbi, she was as devoted to Rabbi Steinsaltz as could be in the most dignifying way. She knew that Rabbi Steinsaltz was changing the world and she wasn't going to impede his efforts. And she gave him a green light to do what he needed to do to change the world. And not only that, she said, I'll be with you, holding your hand alongside your way each and every time. I'll be your support. To the point, and I mentioned this a few days ago, that even though Rabbi Steinsaltz would not sleep at night, he would come home at about 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m., she would wait for him. She would not go to sleep, and she would wait for her husband to show that we're in this together. Your schedule is my schedule. Almost like what Ruth told her mother-in-law, wherever you sleep, I sleep. Wherever you go, I go. Your schedule is my schedule. Same here, your schedule is my schedule. Now, she's a very strong woman, and but she's also a devout chassid of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I mean, again, she comes from a very illustrious family. Rabbi Steinsaltz tells the story. This is a story I heard from Rabbi Steinsaltz himself, that that when he came to his first private audience with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, one-on-one, he was there with his wife, and his wife was holding the newborn daughter. Now, it is customary among Hasidim that when you meet the Rebbe, you remain standing out of respect. You don't sit down. And all Hasidim would remain standing during the private audience. But when they came in, their daughter, Rabbi Steinsaltz's daughter, began to cry hysterically. And Sarah Steinsaltz was holding the daughter, and she didn't know what to do. Now, she wants to stand. She needs to stand. And the Rebbe said to her, no, you sit down. And she said, I can't. I mean, that's not my family. I can't. And the Rebbe forced her to sit down. so that they can have a normal conversation and make her feel comfortable. She has that Hasidic strength. In addition to that, also, she's very mystical, and there are many things. For example, one of the things that point to that, and then we'll get to the next question, but one of the things that point to that is that she herself, at the funeral of Rabbi Steinsaltz, just over, 2 weeks ago, tomorrow will be 2 weeks, she said, well, many I know are asking the question of what happened to our prayers. We were praying for his full and speedy recovery, and we didn't see it. And she promised everyone there at the funeral that if you prayed for my husband, he'll return you the favor. Your prayer might not be fulfilled the way you want it, but he'll make sure that it's fulfilled in some other way. Rabbi Steinsaltz will be there for you as you were there for him. But she didn't just say it. She sensed it, she felt it, and she emanated it. Anyhow, that's Rebbetzin Steinsaltz. Okay, next question. Okay, and this is the last question for this week, and then we'll open this up to any other questions you may have. Dear Rabbi, do we believe in dreams? Last night I had a terrifying dream, and I don't really know what to make of it. Should I believe in it and in what I saw or not? So that's a very good question. We can give a whole class about this. And in fact, there are many books and many Jewish sources dedicated to this. I can think of the last chapter of the Tractate of Brachot in the Babylonian Talmud, that is basically the 9th chapter, is basically dedicated to dreams. And one of the things it says there is that Kol al-chalomot olchim achar hapeh, that all dreams follow your mouth. What does that mean? They follow your interpretation. That if you interpret your dream, even as terrifying as it was, and you didn't tell me what your dream was, but as terrifying as it was, if you interpret it in a good way, you will have a good outcome. The dream will be fulfilled in the best of ways. If God forbid you interpret it in a bad way, then that's what could come. Because kol hachalomot olchim achar hapeh, it's how you say it. And that's why, by the way, the Jewish custom is, I do it with my children. When they come and tell me, Abba, I had a terrible dream, I say, chal matava, chal matava. It was a good dream. Don't say it was terrible. It was a good dream. Because all the dreams follow your mouth. Now, if you're still terrified, there is what's called a hatavat chalom. You find it in many of the prayer books. And that is where you assemble 3 people that serve as a beth din, and you ask them to hatavat chalom, which literally means to better your dream, to turn your dream from what you seem, what you think may be a curse, into a blessing. So there's an actual ceremony that you can do if you still are terrified about your dream. I will say this, and I'll add another layer to this. And I think that when you have bad dreams, it's actually a good sign. Why so? Now, Talmud says this, and this is where, by the way, the Talmud and Sigmund Freud meet. Think about this. The Talmud says that the righteous have bad dreams at night, and the wicked have good dreams at night. Now, how could that be? I'm saying this, you had a terrifying dream, so it might mean that you're righteous. Now, why? How does that make sense, that the righteous have bad dreams at night? So you can only make sense of that Talmudic statement with Sigmund Freud. Why? Because Freud says that dreams are suppressed memories. It's things that you don't want to think of during the day, so you suppress it in your subconscious. And at night, you have no control over your brain anymore. So the suppressed memories come back to life. They float back. You suppress them, but now they are liberated because you have no control over them. So now, a righteous person, what type of thoughts does he suppress? The bad ones. Because he's righteous, he wants to focus on good. So it makes sense to say that at night, he has bad dreams. Those are the dreams. Those are the thoughts, that float back to the front of his mind. A wicked person, what thoughts does he suppress? He's wicked. So he suppresses the good thoughts. So what does he dream of at night? Good dreams. Because it's that which floats back, that he suppressed, which now floats back at night. So I want to add another layer to your question, and that is that if you had a terrifying dream, that's good. That means you must be righteous. You suppress those terrifying ideas during the day, and you focus on good, and you should continue to do that. Even if that means that you have terrifying dreams, but you can remedy that again just by interpreting them in a good way, because all the dreams follow the mouth, and if your mouth and interpretation will be good, so will be the meaning of your dream, and so will be the channel, the direction that it takes in your life in the most practical yet positive manner.